This is absolutely insane, and I need you to hear exactly what just happened on Raw, because if you missed this, you missed one of the most shocking and controversial moments in WWE history. Just minutes ago, Brock Lesnar walked out on Monday Night Raw and declared himself the new leader of the Vision, the faction that has been tearing through WWE for months. And he did it in the most disrespectful, arrogant, and infuriating way possible. Let me say that again, so it really sinks in. Brock Lesnar, the part-timer who shows up when he feels like it, who doesn't respect the locker room, who has never paid his dues to any faction or group, just walked into the Vision and proclaimed himself their leader without asking permission, without earning it, and without showing even the slightest bit of respect to the people who built that faction from the ground up. This is the most entitled, disrespectful power grab we've seen in years, and if this doesn't make your blood boil, if this doesn't make you want to absolutely explode in the comments about how wrong this is, then you're not paying attention. Hit that like button right now if you're as furious as I am about this disrespect. Drop a comment telling me whether the Vision should accept Lesnar as their leader or whether they should stand up and fight back against this hostile takeover. And smash that subscribe button because this situation is developing by the minute and you need to be here for every single update as this story unfolds. Let me set the stage for what led to this absolutely jaw-dropping moment, because context is everything and you need to understand the full scope of what just happened. The Vision has been one of the most dominant factions in WWE over the past several months. They came together as a group of talented wrestlers who felt overlooked and underutilized by WWE management, who believed they deserved better opportunities and more respect than they were getting. The faction included some genuinely skilled performers who had legitimate grievances about their positions on the card. They'd been attacking top stars, disrupting major matches, making statements every single week that they were the future of WWE, whether management liked it or not. The Vision had momentum, had chemistry, had a clear hierarchy with established leadership, and most importantly, they had earned their position through months of consistent work and compelling storytelling. Everything about the Vision was built on the foundation that they were underdogs fighting against the system. Brothers who stood together because individually they couldn't break through, but collectively they were unstoppable. Then Brock Lesnar showed up and decided he wanted what they built. And because he's Brock Lesnar, because he has the power and the leverage and the physical dominance to take whatever he wants, he just announced that he's taking over. No asking, no negotiating, no working his way into the group by proving his loyalty or showing he believes in their cause. He just walked out there with that smug expression on his face, grabbed a microphone, and told the Vision and the entire world that from this moment forward, he's running the show. The sheer arrogance and entitlement of that moment is staggering when you really think about it. Brock Lesnar has everything in WWE. He's been world champion multiple times. He makes more money per appearance than most wrestlers make in a year. He gets special treatment from management. He comes and goes as he pleases with no consequences. He doesn't need the Vision. He doesn't need to be part of a faction. He's doing this purely because he can, because he wants to exert his dominance, because taking over someone else's creation is more satisfying to him than building something of his own. The way this played out on Raw was designed to maximize the shock value and the controversy. The show opened with the Vision in the ring, cutting their usual promo about dominance and unity and how nobody in WWE can stop their rise to the top. They were in the middle of challenging anyone in the locker room to step up and face them when Brock Lesnar's music hit. The crowd erupted because Lesnar's appearances are always significant events. But there was confusion too, because Lesnar has never had any connection to the Vision before. He's never worked with them, never acknowledged them, never given any indication he cared about their existence one way or the other. So when his music hit, everyone, including the Vision themselves, seemed uncertain about what was happening. Was Lesnar coming out to challenge them? Was this about to be an all-out war? Was Paul Heyman somehow involved in orchestrating something behind the scenes? Brock Lesnar walked down that ramp with his typical intensity, that predatory focus that makes it clear he's the most dangerous man in any building he enters. He climbed into the ring and stood face to face with the established leaders of the Vision. And for a moment, there was this incredible tension where it could have gone either way. The Vision could have attacked him immediately, tried to take him out with numbers before he had a chance to do whatever he came out there to do. Lesnar could have started throwing bodies around and destroying the faction, the way he's destroyed so many others throughout his career. Instead, what happened was somehow even more shocking and disrespectful than physical violence. Lesnar grabbed a microphone, looked directly at the leadership of the Vision, and said with absolute certainty that he's their new leader, that the Vision is now his faction, and that they're going to do things his way from this moment forward whether they like it or not. The reaction from the Vision members was telling and honestly kind of pathetic. When you think about what should have happened in that moment, these are guys who have been talking for months about standing up to authority, about taking what they deserve, about refusing to be pushed around by anyone. But when Brock Lesnar stands in front of them and basically says he's taking over their faction, their response was hesitation and uncertainty rather than immediate violent rejection. You could see them looking at each other, trying to figure out how to respond, clearly intimidated by Lesnar's presence, and unsure whether challenging him was worth the physical punishment they'd inevitably suffer. That hesitation, that moment of weakness, told Lesnar and everyone watching that the Vision is vulnerable to exactly this kind of power play. If they were truly the united, fearless brotherhood they claimed to be, they would have attacked Lesnar immediately and damned the consequences. Instead, they froze, and in that frozen moment, Lesnar established his dominance. Paul Heyman's involvement in this situation adds another fascinating layer to what's happening because Heyman has been conspicuously absent from Lesnar's side recently after years of being his advocate and spokesman. When Lesnar made this declaration, Heyman was nowhere to be seen. This raises huge questions about whether Heyman knows about Lesnar's plan to take over the Vision, whether he's secretly orchestrating this from behind the scenes, or whether Lesnar has gone completely rogue and is operating independently without his usual strategic counsel. Heyman has always been the brains to Lesnar's brawn, the strategist who turns Lesnar's physical dominance into calculated career moves. If Lesnar is now making power plays without Heyman's guidance, that suggests either a new level of confidence and independence from Lesnar, or potentially a reckless impulsiveness that could backfire spectacularly. Either way, Heyman's absence from this moment is notable and probably significant as this story develops. The existing leadership of the Vision now faces an impossible situation. If they accept Lesnar as their new leader, they look weak. They look like they're betraying everything they claim to stand for, and they lose all credibility with the WWE Universe. How can you talk about standing up to authority and taking what you deserve when you immediately submit to someone more powerful, taking over your faction? It completely undermines their entire character foundation and makes them look like hypocrites who only have courage when they're not facing real consequences. But if they reject Lesnar and try to force him out of the Vision, they're going to war with the most dangerous man in WWE, someone who has destroyed legends and ended careers, someone who could systematically demolish every member of the faction and leave them broken and humiliated. Neither option is good, which is exactly why Lesnar chose this moment to make his move. He's put the Vision in a position where they lose no matter what they choose. The fan reaction to this development has been absolutely explosive and heavily divided. One segment of the audience thinks this is brilliant storytelling, that Lesnar taking over the Vision creates all kinds of fascinating story possibilities and elevates the faction by association with the biggest star in WWE. These fans argue that the Vision was starting to lose momentum anyway, that they needed something to shake up their direction, and that having Lesnar as their leader instantly makes them relevant at the main event level in ways they weren't before. They point to successful examples in wrestling history where established stars took over or joined existing factions and made everyone involved bigger stars as a result. Think of Randy Orton joining Evolution, or Batista being brought into that group, or countless other examples where factions benefited from adding established main event talent to their ranks. But there's another segment of fans who are absolutely furious about this development, and honestly, their arguments are compelling. These fans invested emotionally in the Vision as a group of underdogs fighting for recognition and respect. They liked the idea of younger wrestlers banding together to force their way into the main event picture through solidarity and determination. Having Brock Lesnar just take over the group destroys that entire narrative and turns the Vision into just another vehicle for an already established star rather than a platform for rising talent. These fans argue that WWE does this constantly, that they can never let younger wrestlers have their moment without established stars taking over and making it about themselves. They're angry that months of character development and faction building is being thrown away so Brock Lesnar can have something new to do during his limited appearances. They feel like the Vision is being sacrificed to serve Lesnar's ego rather than being allowed to succeed or fail on their own merits. Social media has been absolutely on fire since Lesnar made this declaration. Twitter is exploding with takes ranging from calling this genius booking to calling it the death of the Vision and everything they represented. Wrestling forums are filled with passionate arguments about whether this helps or hurts everyone involved. YouTube comments on the Raw clips are running thousands deep with people expressing every possible opinion about what this means for WWE's future. The controversy is exactly what WWE wants because controversy drives engagement. Engagement drives viewership, and viewership drives revenue. But there's a fine line between good controversy that makes people excited to see what happens next, and bad controversy that makes people feel like their investment in characters and storylines was wasted. Which side of that line this Brock Lesnar situation falls on remains to be seen, and will probably depend on how WWE handles the fallout in coming weeks. Let's talk about what this means for Brock Lesnar, specifically because his motivations and goals in taking over the Vision are worth examining. Lesnar has accomplished literally everything there is to accomplish in WWE. He's been WWE Champion, Universal Champion, King of the Ring, Royal Rumble winner, defeated The Undertaker's streak, main evented countless WrestleMania. He's also conquered UFC and became heavyweight champion in legitimate mixed martial arts competition. What's left for a guy like that to accomplish? One thing Lesnar has never really done in WWE is lead a faction. He's always been a solo destroyer or a client with Paul Heyman managing him. He's never had a stable of wrestlers following his lead, doing his bidding, helping him consolidate power. Taking over the Vision gives Lesnar something genuinely new to do with his character, a different dynamic to explore, and potentially a way to extend his relevance as he gets deeper into his 40s and maybe can't perform at the same physical level indefinitely. From a business perspective, having Brock Lesnar attached to the Vision could be beneficial for both parties. The Vision gets instant credibility by association with the biggest star in WWE. Their matches automatically become more important when Lesnar is involved or represented. They get protection from being fed to other top stars because attacking the Vision now means risking Lesnar's wrath. Meanwhile, Lesnar gets a ready-made support system for his limited appearances. When he's not on television, the Vision can represent him and keep his presence felt in WWE programming. When he does appear, he has backup and can be involved in more complex storylines than just solo destroyer angles. This could theoretically be a mutually beneficial arrangement, if WWE books it correctly and if the Vision members are willing to accept their new reality. But let's be honest about the power dynamics here, because that's what makes this situation so uncomfortable and controversial. Brock Lesnar has all the power. He makes more money, has more leverage with management, has more mainstream recognition, and can physically dominate any member of the Vision in about 30 seconds. This isn't a partnership of equals where everyone has a voice and contributes to the group's direction. This is a hostile takeover where Lesnar seized control because he could and because nobody had the courage or the ability to stop him. The Vision went from being a faction built on unity and mutual respect to being Lesnar's personal army in the span of one promo. That's not evolution, that's conquest. And it fundamentally changes what the Vision represents. The booking challenges moving forward are significant. WWE Creative now has to figure out how to make this work in a way that satisfies multiple competing interests. They need to keep Lesnar looking dominant and special, because that's his value proposition and why he commands such a high salary. But they also need to make sure the Vision members don't look like complete jobbers, who exist only to take orders and do Lesnar's dirty work. They need to create compelling television that justifies this major shift in faction dynamics. They need to build toward meaningful payoffs that make this whole angle feel worthwhile rather than a random swerve that goes nowhere. That's a lot of spinning plates to keep in the air. And WWE's track record with complex faction dynamics is honestly pretty mixed. There's also the question of who challenges this new configuration of the Vision. If Brock Lesnar is leading the faction, then any feud with the Vision is essentially a feud with Lesnar, which limits who can credibly be involved. Not many wrestlers on the Raw roster can go toe-to-toe with Lesnar and look legitimate. You're basically talking about Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, maybe Drew McIntyre on a good day. Everyone else would be completely outmatched, which creates storytelling limitations. WWE might need to bring in outside talent or create new alliances specifically to counter this Lesnar-led Vision, which could be interesting but also feels like it's creating work to solve a problem that didn't need to exist in the first place if they'd just let the Vision continue developing naturally. The historical parallels to this situation are worth considering. Wrestling has seen countless examples of established stars taking over or joining existing factions with varying degrees of success. When it works, it's usually because the established star genuinely elevates the other members and creates opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. When it fails, it's usually because the star overshadows everyone else, and the faction becomes about them rather than about the group as a whole. Triple H taking over Evolution worked because it was built into the faction's DNA from the start. Randy Savage leading the Megapowers worked because it was clearly a partnership with Hulk Hogan. But there are also examples like when big stars joined factions and completely sucked all the oxygen out of the room, where the other members became invisible and irrelevant. The challenge for WWE is making sure this Lesnar Vision situation falls into the former category rather than the latter. Let's talk about the individual members of the Vision and how this affects them specifically. Each member now has to make a choice about whether to accept Lesnar as their leader or whether to stand up and risk everything by rejecting him. The smart political move is probably to accept it, at least publicly, while privately looking for opportunities to undermine Lesnar or eventually overthrow him. That creates interesting character dynamics and potential long-term storylines about loyalty, ambition, and power struggles within the faction. But it requires subtlety and patience from WWE Creative, qualities they don't always demonstrate consistently. The alternative is that members start leaving the Vision, either because they refuse to serve Lesnar or because they see the writing on the wall that this faction is now about him rather than about them. If multiple members leave, does the Vision even exist anymore, or is it just Lesnar, with a couple of lackeys? The timing of this declaration is interesting too. Raw has been building towards several major storylines heading into the next premium live event. The Vision was supposed to be part of that build, but now all their storylines potentially get disrupted or redirected to serve this new Lesnar dynamic. Does Lesnar immediately go after championships since he now has faction support? Does he use the Vision to settle old scores with rivals? Does he try to take over Raw entirely and create a hostile work environment where everyone either joins the Vision or becomes a target? The possibilities are numerous, but they all center Lesnar rather than the people who built the Vision, which again goes back to the fundamental problem with this entire situation. Paul Heyman's eventual response to this development is going to be crucial. Heyman was Lesnar's advocate for over a decade. If Lesnar is now leading a faction without Heyman's counsel, that's a direct challenge to Heyman's relevance and importance. Does Heyman try to insert himself as the strategic mind behind this new Lesnar lead Vision? Does he try to sabotage it out of jealousy or resentment? Does he align with Lesnar's enemies to prove that Lesnar needs him more than he needs Lesnar? Heyman is one of the most intelligent characters in WWE, and he doesn't take disrespect lightly. His moves in response to this situation could be just as impactful as anything Lesnar does with his newfound faction leadership. The locker room reaction is another factor that WWE will hopefully explore. Other wrestlers on Raw can't be happy that Lesnar just waltzed in and took over an established faction. It sets a dangerous precedent where anyone with enough power and leverage can just take whatever they want without consequences. It undermines the entire concept of earning your position through hard work and consistency. Wrestlers who have been with WWE for years, who show up every week, who work house shows and television and premium live events. They're watching a part-timer who appears occasionally just claim leadership of a faction he had nothing to do with building. That has to create resentment, and smart booking would tap into that resentment to create organic, feeling conflicts and storylines. There's also an interesting meta-commentary happening here about WWE's booking, philosophy, and power structures. Brock Lesnar taking over the Vision is essentially WWE management imposing their will on an organic creation by the locker room. The Vision was supposed to represent wrestlers taking control of their own narratives, and now, an established star backed by management has taken that control away from them. Whether WWE is doing this intentionally as commentary, or whether it's just happening accidentally because they wanted to do something with Lesnar, doesn't really matter. The end result is the same. A faction built on the idea of fighting the power has been absorbed by the power. And that's a deeply cynical and potentially depressing message to send to your audience about whether it's even possible to challenge the status quo in Let's consider the absolute worst case scenario for how this plays out. Lesnar leads the Vision for a few months, gets whatever storylines WWE wants him in, then disappears back to his farm when his limited date contract is fulfilled. The Vision is left in shambles, having lost all their momentum and credibility by serving as Lesnar's temporary backup singers. The members who stayed loyal to Lesnar look like fools for trusting him. The members who left look like they were right, but they sacrificed their positions in the faction and have to rebuild elsewhere. Nobody wins, except Lesnar, who got what he wanted and left without consequences. That's the nightmare scenario, and honestly, it's not that far-fetched based on how WWE has handled similar situations in the past. The best-case scenario is that this creates a genuinely compelling long-term storyline where the Vision members eventually rise up against Lesnar, where there's internal conflict and power struggles that make for great television, where everyone involved comes out of this looking better than when they started. Maybe someone in the Vision emerges as the leader who finally stands up to Lesnar and earns the respect of the locker room and the audience. Maybe this creates a new main event star who defeats Lesnar and takes back control of the Vision in a cathartic moment that pays off months of storytelling. That would be ideal, but it requires WWE to actually follow through on the setup rather than getting distracted by the next shiny object and abandoning this storyline halfway through like they've done countless times before. The reality is probably somewhere between those extremes. We'll get some interesting television out of this development. Some memorable moments, probably at least one really good match or segment involving Lesnar and the Vision. But whether it ultimately benefits everyone involved or just serves Lesnar's ego remains to be seen. What's undeniable is that this declaration has fundamentally changed the Vision forever. They can never go back to being the scrappy underdog faction fighting for recognition because that narrative is dead. They're now either Lesnar's faction or they're the faction that used to exist before Lesnar took over. Either way, their identity has been permanently altered by this moment. The fan investment in this storyline going forward is going to be crucial. If fans reject the premise that Lesnar should lead the Vision, if they boo this development and make it clear they want the original Vision back, WWE might have to pivot their plans. But if fans embrace Lesnar Vision and want to see where this goes, WWE will double down and build major storylines around this new configuration. Fan reaction doesn't always determine booking decisions, but it definitely influences them, especially in an era where social media makes audience sentiment immediately visible and measurable. The next few weeks of crowd reactions and online discourse will tell WWE whether they've struck gold or stepped in it with this Brock Lesnar power grab. So here we are, just minutes after Brock Lesnar declared himself the leader of the Vision on Raw, and the wrestling world is absolutely reeling from the implications. This is either the beginning of a fascinating new chapter for both Lesnar and the Vision, or it's the death of everything the Vision represented and stood for. The original leadership has been disrespected and overshadowed. The faction's identity has been hijacked by someone who had nothing to do with building it. And Brock Lesnar has once again demonstrated that in WWE, power trumps everything else, including loyalty, consistency, and earning your position through merit. Whether you love this development or hate it, whether you think it's brilliant booking or creative bankruptcy, you absolutely cannot ignore it because it's going to shape Raw's direction for months to come. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now about whether the Vision should accept Lesnar or fight back. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any updates on this developing situation. And get ready, because what happens next is going to determine whether this moment is remembered as a masterstroke or as the moment WWE killed one of their most promising factions.